Do it.
Good morning, everyone. You can say good morning back. We're about conversation.
Oh, good Lord.
My name is Lisa Hamilton. I want you to bear with me. I'm not a professional, and this is terrifying, but I'm going to do the best I can to represent my small group. Y'all are going to make me cry. Okay. I'm going to read this off my phone
Louder,
so that I
she
don't
says.
screw it up. I'm sorry. I'm going to read this off my phone so that
Okay.
I don't screw it up, okay? My name is Lisa Hamilton, and I'm an organizing advocate for Shoulders Down. We are a new group formed here in Phoenix with the goal of, making space for conversations between people of different and often opposing viewpoints. We are entirely volunteer, organized, and run, a complete amateur show. I'm not an expert, not a professional organizer, not really comfortable as a leader or speaking in public. I'm just someone who is beyond tired of the vitriol lobbed across this political divide in this country. Yeah, thank you. To me, none of the solutions that we need to the huge, complex problems facing us will be found if we don't figure out how to talk and work together with people who we don't agree with. I was lucky enough to meet two people with similar ideas, and we created Shoulders Down. And my partners were supposed to be here today, but one of them is sick and the other one got stuck on the I-17. I understand that this is hard. I get that tempers run high, people close off, facts are hotly contested, confrontations can be scary. And even though everyone's yelling, nobody feels heard. So in Shoulders Down, we started with the hearing and the listening and the stories. We believe all this passion comes from a personal story for each person. And that story will lead to understanding if we can be still and listen and be thoughtful. And then share our story in kind. We have to build some level of trust, some kind of common understanding if we're going to knit our communities back together and work on our own behalf. We cannot wait for the government to do this for us. We have to do it ourselves. At Shoulders Down, we do this thoughtful, careful conversation by following respectful guidelines in small groups and by structuring each conversation around a selected, sometimes controversial topic. We keep it all within a set time frame. We offer food and drinks because it's about being sociable as much as it is about being challenging. And we want to be welcoming as much as we can. So the saying about thinking globally and acting locally, Shoulders Down is an example of acting locally. You're going to hear a lot of other examples today, I'm sure. And I know I and my fellow panelists welcome your questions and conversation as the workshop continues. And I just want to say thank you very much for coming.
No, your turn. I already spoke. Okay. All right, fine. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background, I was in the military for 14 years. I worked in civil affairs, which basically means my job was teaching all the infantry types that want to kick in doors, which doors not to kick in, how to get along with people, how to have dialogue. In fact, one of the most difficult moments I ever had in Iraq was when I had to sit down with two leaders of two tribes, one who I knew had blown up my fellow soldiers in convoys and been a part of that, and I had to sit down and negotiate a deal between the two of them and get them to agree through a translator to agree to a contract that they were going to work on together. Yeah, right. So I have some experience working across the aisle. My father is where I learned it all from. He is a blue-collar conservative. He's a wonderful man. He believes in America. He believes in everything. He loves watching Fox News, and he loves politics, and he loves that he's informed. Oh, I know. That's every dinner we ever have. That's my feeling. As we sit down, he goes, so I was watching the news the other night. Well, here we go. Okay. But I've learned that what he's saying, he believes in. And as soon as you get to that point, you realize that the people that we're talking to, they believe in America too. And they wholeheartedly believe that what they're telling you is right and is a good thing. And they're amazed that you don't understand what they understand. The same way that we are amazed that they don't understand what we understand. So I've worked with some of the people in this room on conservative campaigns. I've run for office twice. In fact, if I could point a couple of them out, Marie Colangelo is part of LD18, and if you don't know, this is the one of the very few swing districts in Arizona, and they had a huge win, taking the Senate seat and the House seat this last session. If we could give Marie a hand, she was part of that effort. Oh, yeah. That's not easy. We also have former congressional candidate James Woods. James, if you could put your hand up. James ran as a blind atheist I'm not kidding, he is actually blind, and that was on his all of his campaign materials. Was it Teaching Congress to See? Was that it? Ah, right. In a wildly conservative district, Congressman Salmon's district, to change the way that people thought. He ran a very unique type of campaign, all built on issues, just to change the way that people thought in the heart of probably the most difficult place to run in all of the Valley. So with that, I also have worked for two congressmen. I worked for Congressman Harry Mitchell in the third most conservative district held by a Democrat in 2010. I was his Veterans Outreach Coordinator. I've worked with all sorts of veterans my entire career. I've talked to all sorts of crazy Republicans that have asked me about if Obama was raped as a little boy because he's a Muslim, what does that mean for our country? Not if, but what does it mean for our country that he was raped as a Muslim boy? And asking me, well, why don't I get that? Why don't I understand? And what can I do about this, right? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. That's a real statement that I've had from people that were concerned, like how can this even happen? How can this person get to be president? And most recently, I quit my job working for a wonderful man, Congressman Ruben Gallego, who's a veteran himself, who is taking the fight to Washington. He's doing some amazing work, but I wanted to do more. So I'm working on a book called Elephants Are from Mars, Donkeys Are from Venus. Subtitle, Saving the American Marriage from Partisan Divorce. And the concept, and keep in mind this is aimed at moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats, is that ever since women got the right to vote, the two parties have moved to a compassionate mother and protective father mentality. And as soon as you put it in that framework, it's easier to understand the other side, especially for them, that they can say, oh, that evil liberal on the other side, that's like my mother, who took care of me as a child. And the whole book is literally written as an elephant and a donkey with a counselor, teaching them that when you talk about immigration and you talk about saving that poor boy, he hears, you've made my house unsafe. And teaching people how to understand each other and value each other. And with that, I think it's the right time to turn it over. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Gerry Hills, and I am an issue advocate, which means I have been doing gun control in the state of Arizona for 22 years. Well, thank you for that, but I also think I need to clarify it that up until last November, I did it as a registered Republican for 36 years. So how did that happen? Okay. It's October 18th, 1994. I'm a stay-at-home mom in Glendale, Arizona, and I get a phone call at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. My brothers, my dad, my family is on the annual fall hunting trip in Michigan. My younger brother, who is an off-duty police officer, and 3 other gentlemen have been ambushed and murdered by a suspect who is a known federally licensed firearm dealer and a known Michigan militia member. Okay? So, welcome to the world. Next thing I know, I am on a plane to Michigan. I am dealing with media and a very high-profile funeral and a mass, I understand what mass shootings look like from the other side. 6 months later, I see in the Arizona Republic a little tiny article that says, I'm going to take this off so I can hold it because it's bothering me. So 6 months later, I see a little tiny article in the Arizona Republic, and it's from the Brady campaign, and they're doing a Mom's Day campaign. Well, I'm a good PTA homeroom mom. I know how to do this stuff. I pick up the phone, and I explain to them my story, and I think I'm going to stuff envelopes. I get put on hold, and this lovely lady gets back on, and it's Sarah Brady. And Sarah says, we've got hearings on the Hill about the assault weapons ban. Can you come and testify? So when you think that you're out in the audience and you're a grassroots person and, you can't do these things, believe me, yes, you can. So not knowing what I didn't know, I get on a plane and I go to Washington, and the next thing I'm in a Senate hearing room and I'm testifying about the assault weapons ban, and I'm at the White House with President and Mrs. Clinton, okay? So all as a Republican, remind you guys this. And with the help of the Brady campaign, I came home, and with a great group of dedicated community volunteers, we started Arizonans for Gun Safety. And people who aren't here anymore, but we passed Shannon's Law in 1999 and random fire, and we fought that bill back this year. It can be done. So through all of this, I want to let you know that I have always felt like I've had a foot in two worlds, and I've had to learn to communicate with both sides. Because in the gun violence prevention world, most of those are very liberal progressives. And I had to prove myself as a more kind of center-right Republican that I had a seat at the table and I was really genuinely involved in this work. On the other hand, my Republicans would assume that you do gun violence work and you're really coming to take my guns. So I had to learn early the skills to be able to communicate with both, and that's what we're here to talk about, is how to communicate with people who don't agree with you on everything, find common ground where you can, and work on that. Because how many of you have read either The Tipping Point or Good to Great for the Social Sector in this room? Great. If you haven't, I recommend you read both those books. They're very important. Because what it is about, it's about finding common ground where you can work together and working together. We will never meet the goals in this state that we want simply by working within our own comfort zones and our own bubbles. My organization has survived doing gun violence prevention work in Arizona, some of the toughest in the country, because we think outside the box. My organization is made up of liberal progressives, libertarians, Republicans, gun owners, and everything else in the book. We work together, we have very clear goals, and we all want to do that, and we're very clear about what we work together, and we find to do that respectfully. So how do we do that, and how do we do that? I'm a great debater, and we're going to take questions in just a minute, I promise. So I can debate, and I'm really good, and I can win arguments. And I've won arguments against some really tough people. One of my greatest claims to fame is I have debated Ann Coulter on national television, got her so angry that she walked off the stage and let me finish the show by myself. Okay? Well, before you get too excited about that, that's great. I've debated John Lott, who is the guru of the gun manufacturer lobby. Great. But you know what? I can win arguments, but if I'm not moving the needle and I'm not creating policy change, I'm not winning on my argument. And you want to talk about yelling past people and yelling past talking points? Try that with a bunch of gun guys who all they want to tell you is that you're coming to take their guns. So about 2 years ago, I became introduced to a new way of doing things. I was actually at a meeting, and it was about homelessness. And I was introduced to a new way of thinking about it, and it was called civil dialogue. ASU has the Institute of Civil Dialogue. And it was a new way of having conversations, and I hope some of you have had a chance to experience that. And I took this back to Arizona's for Gun Safety, and I said, you know what, guys, we got to change the conversation because we're winning arguments, but we're not moving the needle, and we've got to find a new way to reach out to people and expand this, because this is how we're going to get to that critical mass and get the policies we need done. We know background checks are 90% supported in this state, but we still don't have them. How come? and we need to change the conversation. So as a group, we decided to make an investment in this, and we all went out and got trained to be civil dialogue people, and we created the Center for Civil Dialogue and Policy. It's not our, we didn't create this model, it's a model we use, where civil dialogue just wants to create a conversation. So instead of panels up here and people being talked at, we go in and we do groups of very diverse people. We bring up 5 people and sit them around in a chair of 5, and we lead them through conversations about some very controversial topics. And we stick to around guns, but I've seen it done on just about any topic there is. And we've talked about background checks. We've talked about assault weapons bans. We've talked about now the silencers that are being deregulated. We've talked about just about every gun issue you can think about, child access prevention, and things like that. And we have, instead of ending up having yelling matches, having conversations with people we never would have had and finding common ground and finding ways where we can find agreement. And it's been life-changing for all of us, from the way I feel, because when I can win a debate afterwards, I don't feel good. Because I have to go to a place where I don't like how I feel, and I'm sure most of you have felt that way when you get into disagreements with people you care about, and you don't feel good after that kind of conversation. Coming out of a civil dialogue where you can, again, still talk about how you feel and be passionate about what you care about, but in a respectful way, you feel differently at the end of that conversation, and that is really, really important. So this is what I want to tell you about as you engage in this work, whether you're new or you're a veteran of being engaged in this, is that learning civil dialogue techniques, whether it's civil dialogue or any other kind of technique, that kind of active listening, when you talk to someone who doesn't agree with you, learn to listen to understand, not necessarily listen to frame your next argument to make your point. And if you do that, you will connect with people in a way, and you will be able to move them in a way where I think we can all make progress on the really important work we have to do in this state. So now I'm going to finish up and turn it over to your questions to all of us. If you're interested in this, again, we are going to continue this conversation. My organization is happy to come and host civil dialogues to any of your groups. There's flyers at our table, Arizona's for Gun Safety, over in the other hall. Please reach out to us. This is what we do. And thank you very much for your time this morning.
Okay, so you guys are going to put me to the test. I'm going to work the room. We have 2 microphones. We're good. So help me out. We can move these around, and I can come to people. Okay.
The best one is, there is Good to Great for the social sector. It's 36 pages long, and it's by Jim Collins. And the other one is The Tipping Point by Gladwell. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And if I could throw in 2 others. Don't Think of an Elephant. What? Everybody's...
Good to Great.
Okay, Good to Great for the social sector. Good to Great for the social sector.
And 2 books by George Lakoff, Moral Politics, which is where I got a lot of the ideas that I'm working on in my book, and Don't Think of an Elephant. And Don't Think of an Elephant, Moral Politics. And one last one, The Political Brain by Drew Weston. In fact, I would say that's probably, if you want to start somewhere to understand how conservatives think and communicate, start with The Political Brain.
Okay, and also, as conference attendees, you will be emailed a URL address that will have all conference materials on it, and we will make sure that a list of all the books we've talked about this morning is on there. So absolutely write them down, keep asking us for the names, but we want to make you know that we are going to be sending that out to everybody. You'll have a list of all materials for all the sessions, and we'll make sure those books are on that. Okay, who did I see? Right here. And you have to talk close to the microphone.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Can you hear me? Really close. Okay, thank you. I have a question about the Fox News source of information. How do you move people who are only getting their information, both sides, from only one source? How do you move them from that to maybe something that might be a little bit more neutral facts? Not alternate facts, but neutral facts.
Who is that for? Corey? She said the Fox News. Oh, you know, civil dialogue, the way we work it, it's actually, they discourage people coming in with facts loaded. So what we use is something called the fact checker. So we don't reveal the question until that is, so people can't load up ahead of time, number one, to stop them coming in with all these facts. And if someone says something which we feel is very factually untrue, we have a fact checker who's part of our 3-person team, and they will go and fact check that, and they will say, oh, well, according to this source, blah, 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 here is the truth. So we actually call people out on false facts right in the middle of the discussion.
I'd like to, oh, sorry, wow, that was really loud. From an interpersonal situation, not so much a group, but when you're dealing with someone who's coming from a very narrow perspective. Who in this room is dealing with someone coming from a very narrow perspective? That's what I thought. Okay, so we're all
And they're
friends
all
here.
saying the same thing about us.
Okay, they do. For a fact, they do. Anecdotally, I think that we need to remember that facts do not persuade. That doesn't work. We yell facts at each other, we scream at each other, we try to persuade. It does not work. The first thing that I think of when I hear, how do I talk to, is first listen, then listen some more, then bite your tongue and keep listening. Because you need to understand where they're coming from first. And if it's one source of news and you know that there's a problem with their source, I'll admit, Fox News is not news. We all know that. The people that I've encountered who have that source, generally they're adamant and vocal because they're afraid about something. And when you get down to what is it they're afraid about, a good example is the health care bill. There is all of this, I'm sorry? There was someone there. Right. There is a segment of the population on both sides that you just can't even bother engaging with, and yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah.
Okay. So it's tricky because especially when those types of stories, they don't need facts because they I mean, if for those that have read The Political Brain, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The types of arguments they're making, they're not these arguments. They are arguments here directed at the lizard brain because they know. Think again of that protective father. That if that protective father feels threatened, like in other words, if his family or her family, I use these terms generally. I know we're enlightened Democrats, or liberals or whatever, but bear with me on this. The archetype of the protective father, when you understand that they are afraid and their only recourse is to be angry, you have to be able to respond at that same level. There are also plenty of trigger words that InfoWars and Fox News has planted with them. These are the good words and these are the bad words. And just so you know, most of our language are the bad words. A great example, and I worked as a ghostwriter on Hillary Clinton's campaign for generals and admirals in Ohio and Florida. So I ran into this all the time. God bless Hillary and her campaign, but it drove me nuts. They did not understand how to communicate emotionally. I would write stories. I would hear these great stories from these admirals and generals who couldn't write, and they'd be like, help me write this. And I would turn it in, and they would take out all of the emotion. They would take out all of the narrative. They were like, we want policy, we want fact, because we want to be honest, because we have that's the story about us, that we lie, right? So we want to be completely honest and straightforward with the American people. And I was like, good, but if you could just pepper in a little bit of feeling. Like, for example, a great example, talking about comprehensive immigration reform says absolutely zero to any of those conservatives. Or at best, it reminds them of comprehensive health care reform, which is negative. So we actually got Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema to talk about this way: strong free market immigration controls. I know that sounds awful to your ears, right? I see some of you scrunching up your faces as I'm saying that. Ugh, gross. Feels bad on my tongue. But it's the exact same thing. And if you talk about it in those terms that person can understand, it's the same thing. Strong free market immigration controls. We're talking about using the market to get these people in to be guest workers and to build up the economy. And they go, that sounds strong and straightforward. And they can hear that. They can't hear when you talk about, we just have to have compassion. And that poor polar bear up there that's going to lose its iceberg, what are we doing for that polar bear? They don't give a crap unless you talk about the security threat. I worked on, Bibles, Badges, and Businesses with a friend of mine here locally, where we were aiming at talking about, was it gun? Oh, which one? I can't remember which. But point being, we were talking, that was it. We were talking about climate change, but we were talking about it in terms that they can understand. So we talked about it in terms of the security threat that climate change is going to put on the world. And as soon as you look at it from that framework, it completely changes. Then it's real for them. Then they can go, I see what you're saying.
All right, we have one here in the front, I have one in the back, and then another one here in the front. And then I see some other hands that came up, but because we've got 40 minutes left. Okay. So I'm your time checker as well.
All right, thank you for being here. My question is, when you're talking to the other side and you're trying to engage in civil discourse and you're trying to listen, that involves some sort of openness to their viewpoint. What point does openness to a viewpoint become not tolerable? For example, I'm thinking of somebody that espouses something that's so far out of line and is just immoral that you can't accept that. At what point do you say, okay, I'm going to listen to you on X, Y, and Z, but I will not listen to you on this because I think you're morally wrong?
You want to take that one? I'll say at the point you're in.
What is the secret to that?
I think, I've had people look at me, and I'll take it back to what I know best, which is gun control. And I've had people look at me and go, well, at the opening thing, Charlton Heston looked at me. Years ago, he came and opened the Arizona legislature, and I was there as a guest of one of the things, and he introduced me, and people told him that I was the sister of a fallen officer and all that thing. And he looked at me and said, I'm very sorry for your loss, but let's be clear here that he probably did something to provoke it. Okay? Yeah, and that's not the worst I've heard. Okay? So, again, you're talking about immoral things, or people will say, or I had even better one, there's a local gun advocate, and we were going to do Bram Resnick's show. And we were in the green room, and he made a comment to me as we were going down, and he said, there really isn't a gun violence problem. He goes, in Scottsdale, he goes, we don't have a gun violence problem. As long as it's black or brown people killing each other, who cares? All right, and he said that to me deliberately to really make me angry. Now, yeah, that's immoral. And I called him out on live television about it, and he didn't think I'd have the nerve to say, well, you just said to me in the green room ABC. And so I think we do have to draw some moral imperatives there. When, to me, it is those kind of racism things where they look at me and they go, Alex Jones and Sandy Hook, and it was, it's fake. Yeah, no, it's not. And when Megyn Kelly interviewed him this week, I was part of a boycott to do that, because to me that was so immoral to give him that kind of time on television. So I think you do have to draw those lines. But up until that point, 90% of the people you want to engage in, really, I think you have to go into these conversations with, people are not bad, they're not evil, they just see the world from a different point of view, and you have got to try to at least meet them there. You may be disappointed sometimes, but more times than not, you are going to find common ground. There will be those, who just really are so far on the other side that you are never going to find common ground. No one's going to say that some of these tactics or these approaches are good 100% of the time. But I think we all have to draw those lines for ourselves and say, morally, I just can't work with these people. And I've certainly come across those in my work. So,
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for. Hold it closer. Hi. Okay. I want to be doing a demonstration. Hi. Thank you so much for being here, and it's been great hearing y'all. I teach at ASU, and one of the classes I teach is just freshman comp, English 102 rhetoric, and once we've gone through classical argument, I have changed it around and have them write to a resistant audience on the same topic. And I found using Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a way to explain where people are coming from has been really helpful. And so I'm wondering, out of these books, if there's one that uses sort of things that people might already be familiar with, one. And two, I'm sort of appalled at the fact that they come in with so little knowledge of rhetoric. It seems to me that a lot of the conservative talking heads in the media have studied classical rhetoric and do sort of understand the power of words and language and storytelling and narrative. And I'm wondering if any of you are doing anything in the public schools about this, or know of someone who is, and how perhaps I could get involved in such a thing, or likewise.
The curriculum for civil dialogue at ASU, I know, is grounded with a lot of those things. And the white paper on civil dialogue, I think, as Lee mentioned, is going to be shared. The link for that will be shared to all that. And or you can find it on their website. It's Clark. I don't know if you're familiar with him over at ASU. Yeah. So, and I know the whole program was written grounded on that. So I think there are definite elements in that training that we received. We have done civil dialogue at schools. So one of the first ones we ever did, we went out to Brophy, and we did 3 rounds of that. And it was extremely successful. The kids really get this. And every opportunity we get to go do it out in elementary schools and things, we definitely do. And at first when we tried it, they were a little skeptical of taking it down to as low as middle schoolers, and we've had great success. So that's something we're concentrating on, is bringing this this dialogue to schools and getting the kids talking at that young of an age. Thanks.
I do have one thing to offer. There is an online organization called Bridge the Divide that's targeted specifically at teen and young adults, and it is about this particular topic, learning how to talk to each other from opposing viewpoints. You might want to check it out.
All right. I promised you next. I see all these other hands. I'm keeping you in order, I promise.
Hi. My name is Susan Hudson, and a big part of what I do is on social media, both on Facebook and more recently on Twitter. Oh, my Lord. Wow. This is awfully personal. Hello, everyone. I've been pretty astonished at the reactions that I've been getting on Twitter to some of my tweets that have gone viral. My mother keeps encouraging me to have a discourse, have a dialogue with these people. And when they immediately come on the offensive and call you foul names and just take it to a personal level, just immediately. And a lot of mine are because I'm also a veteran, and I tweet a lot about veterans' rights. And then they come out and they're like, well, I bet you didn't really serve or whatever. It's just I'm using that as an example as to how they take it so personal. And I'm not even trying to dialogue with them because it's like, you're a troll. Don't feed the trolls, especially on Twitter. And I block them. I don't know what else to do besides tell them off, which I also do, depending on my mood.
Facebook is, I think, a little bit better for this, where you can set the rules for your page that you can say, as soon as someone gets on and decides to call names or whatever else, you can say, this is not acceptable. If it happens again, you're no longer my Facebook friend. Twitter is harder because it's both wonderfully and terribly democratic. Anybody can respond to anything, and they've figured out that they can do that. I don't have a good response other than that the people in this room and everybody you talk to, you need to encourage that. You can't be scared because they're looking to say something terrible, so you'll go, oh, I don't want to be a part of this conversation. I'm done. They're gambling on the fact that you'll go, I don't want to do that. And it's so easy to feel alone. I've been working on social media for a lot of my career, and it's tricky. When you put something out there and you get 5 people weighing in and yelling at you, you feel beaten down. So 20 or a lot more than that. One of the things that we're doing, and I'll pass this out to you guys in our information packet. There's locally, there's a lot of people on Twitter called the Resistance. I don't know if they are wonderful. They will back you up. They will follow you. They doubled my amount of Twitter followers in one day, and I've been working on Twitter forever. I hate it. I don't like it, but I've been trying to get better at it. And they will find you those people. You've got to build a team. You've got to get a group of people that, there's no way to stop it. You just I think, does that sound about right for your experience? You just have to.
And I do have, I actually have a team of indivisible leaders that back me, and people that I don't even know will tell me, oh, that's a troll. Thank you. Thought I had a loud mouth. People that I don't even know on Twitter will warn me that's a troll, and like in advance. So I think that there is a social media workshop coming up later today. So.
Yeah.
I think the conversation will be.
Yeah, there is a workshop about social media, so I'd like to try to help us move off of that. I just want to say one thing about it. If you're using social media as a method to try to persuade, how many people in this room had their mind changed by something they read on social media? Then stop. It's not working. Stop.
Exactly.
Right, what
Next
we want to
question.
talk about is those, I'm at Thanksgiving, and I don't want to not have a relationship with my father. So how do we stay engaged and not go to a I'm writing you off place? Yeah, the social media session is supposed to be really good. We'll help talk about
I'm going to
those
start
tools.
off real
Okay.
quick, and then
So
I'll let someone else talk about that in particular.
We
No, no.
have, I know we've got so many questions. We're limited with time, so I'm going to ask everybody who's got a question. Please make sure it's a question. We can have open up a different session for sharing. Certainly follow up with the panel, but I want to make sure that we give everybody an opportunity. So I've got 2 over here, and then I'm going to head back over here to the center. And after I let Lisa talk. Yes, thank you.
While she's walking back there, on the 28th of July, we are all going to be doing a coffee to continue this conversation. If you want to come, we would love to have you all there. We are even talking about potentially turning it into multiple, coffees, maybe once a month or something, where we discuss each of our different topics that we work on. So we encourage you to come to that, and if you put your name on the list that's going around, we will make sure you get that information. Sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing. I actually have a group that meets on a monthly basis, so if you want to get involved in similar kinds of conversations with Shoulders Down, I have information we'll be passing out at the end, so you can join with us or join in the larger group or however you're comfortable with.
All right, thank you.
Hi. I just want to know, I want to tell you about a strategy that I've been using that I feel good about, and I want to know if any of you on a more formal way have gotten any response with a similar sort of thing with Thanksgiving kind of situations. After the listening, you need to know where to go. Okay, I'm listening. So what I've been saying is, okay, I'm demonstrating respect for your point of view. What you're saying is interesting, and my way of acting on that respect is I promise you that at least once a week I will listen to Fox News, and I'm asking you the favor of demonstrating respect for me after I'm sitting here listening calmly and not being confrontational. Will you demonstrate respect for me by listening to PBS once a week? Have you had any of those kind of strategies in a more formal way? Have you gotten good results? I've gotten nods and smiles. and at least I walk away without a bloody nose,
Sure.
Not exactly in that way, but what I have done is, again, because I'm very focused on it being an issue advocate and not a more general type of thing, is once we've kind of listened, and I've listened to the other side about, why they feel the basic need to, like, own a gun or have a gun to protect themselves, this kind of thing. I don't lead anymore with all the facts and all the things. But then I look at them, and it's part of what Corey was talking about framing my message in a way that they listen to, especially that Papa Bear mode, and especially that. And I find one of the most powerful ones that I can use to start a conversation with them is after I've listened and say, well, you're a fiscal conservative, that kind of thing. Do you know that gun violence costs Arizonans $1.9 billion a year? And believe me, leading with that one as opposed to any of the other facts or figures I have at my fingertip, I can get their attention that way and say, that's a lot of wasted money by treating gunshot injuries and deaths and injuries. If we brought down that, think of all what we could do with that money or how we could save that kind of thing. So it's about learning to frame the conversation in a way that they can listen to. And I found that's helpful, not necessarily saying, because gun issues and things, it's not necessarily one certain news outlet over another for my issue, but it's about framing.
And sorry, before we jump into the next question, think about it in terms of working together on something. Clinton did this famously, Bill Clinton, with the Palestinians and the Israelis. Instead of talking about who blew up who, he said, let's just talk about water. Let's talk about water and who's doing trash. Okay. You build up to yes. The more yeses you get, the more someone is working with you on a problem. And I said this to my dad one day. And he's got the pictures of Nazis taking away guns in his garage. Like first the Nazis came for the guns, and that's why we have to have guns. And I'm like, Dad, you think our government is going to shoot you, and you need these guns to shoot back? Yes. Okay. So I said to him,
the Nazis actually never did do that, but that's
right,
okay.
Right, accurate. But they believe it. It doesn't matter. He's got it up on his walls. So I said to him, okay, we both agree there's a problem with gun deaths, right? Like start from the place of agreement. Yes. Business people use this all the time. How to get to yes. You get little yeses to get to the big yes. So how do we get to that point where we find a solution that can be agreed upon on both sides? And like, well, my solution is right. You say, no, part of the problem, and they'll say this, and Fox News talks about this all the time, this is a great inroad, they'll say, part of the problem is the anger on the left. And I say to my dad, when you're angry, you're part of the problem on the right. The anger is the problem because it doesn't let us think through. And I also tell people, the more angry you get, the more you should go to factcheck.org. If you see something about Obama peeing on a flag, if it sounds beyond ridiculous and gets you so angry, that's when you should look it up. Like the no big deal stuff, whatever, but look up the crazy stuff. Get them in the mindset of working on a problem with you. How do we find a solution that moderates, that Republicans and Democrats can agree on? And when you start from that place, it's a whole different conversation because and they love solutions. Say, help me find that solution.
I've got one thought. Okay? The other thing I want you to consider is I try, and I would like you to try, to consider that you might be wrong. You might be wrong. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, so I have one friend particularly who always wants to engage with me politically, right? And he's not generally coming from a morally inappropriate place, but he's pushing. He's pushing his viewpoint. And I push back, and there's a dialogue, and I don't think either of us have convinced the other person of the other side, but do you think, A, it's a good strategy to engage in that dialogue, and B, to maintain as many friendships like that as you can in your general social sphere?
Yes and yes. I think that we may not ever always convince everyone. We're not going to convince everybody, but we do have to live together. We have to sometimes look at each other across the breakfast table. We have to sometimes sleep next to each other, pick each other up at school, go to PTA. We have to live together, and we have lots of things that we work on together. But we won't be able to do that if we don't keep talking to each other. And we're going to stop talking if we're not listening. I don't want to talk to people who don't want to listen to me. I want to listen to people who want to talk to me. I might learn something. Anybody else?
Okay, one quick, just to follow up on that. What do you do with the passive person who says, well, let's just agree to disagree? And just walks away, right?
I'm going to cop to that one. I've actually done that. I mean, I'll cop to it. I'm right or wrong, I've done that. I've had disagreements with people. At some point, it's clear I'm not being heard. I'm not being listened to anymore. I care deeply about you. I completely disagree with you. I care deeply about you. Clearly, we're not going to get past this, so we have to either agree to disagree or we're going to sever our ties. And I don't want to sever ties, so we agree to disagree. This particular person didn't want to do that, wanted to keep, campaigning. I'm not hearing it. I mean, I think you need to protect yourself. Each of us needs to protect ourselves in these relationships and engagements, but understand that each of these engagements is an opportunity to get clearer on what we think, what we feel, what we believe, what our story is. So we're better at telling it the next time around.
Thank you.
Let me follow up on that one. In the military, we would talk about this in terms of the front lines and probing for the weak spots. So if my dad, for example, with the guns, that's not the place that I'm going to win the fight. So I want to continue to have a dialogue with him. So I will find those other inroads, those other spots where I'll ask him, where can you agree with me? Where are those places? Let's start from that spot and move forward there. Because once you build up trust, when there's something that's important, say if this is a family member we're talking about, you want to be able to go to them and say, this is super important to me. I listen to you. This is when I'm telling you, you listen to me, and do some fact checking on this, because that's the long game. The short game is being right in one argument, and that's the losing game.
Hi, my name's Leonard Aldies. I'm a retired medical school professor and research neuroscientist, and I've got just a really quick question. What do you do when you're engaged with someone one-on-one, which I generally like to do, and just like they see on the news, and it doesn't matter which channel it is, you can't get a word in. They start yelling, and they won't hear anything you say. So just simple question, strategy. You're the professionals. Some suggestions on what to do when you encounter that. Again, I see it all the time on the media. It's noise. That's why we listen to the BBC. They're thoughtful questions and answers, and nobody interrupts. There's civil discourse, civil discussion, not civil discourse. So that's my question.
2 words: walk away. And I'm serious about. Hold up. And I don't mean that just in walking away. I mean, you have to bring the conversation back down. So you try to interject and you say, look, I want to have a conversation about this, and to me that's a dialogue. Can we pause? So that and if they keep talking over you, go, look, I can't have just a one-way conversation, because that's not a conversation. If you want to continue to have that conversation, you have that on your own, because clearly you're not talking to me, and walk away. And then they're going to go, oh, this person isn't listening to me. And okay. And if they're going to be mad, they're going to be mad. But you've changed the conversation. Find those ways to change the conversation with that person, because it's kind of like a fight. If everybody's around, you feel like you have to do that fight. If everybody's watching that fight, But as soon as it's just 2 guys, or 2 women, whatever, they can go, well, let's dial it down a little bit. You've taken the air out of the argument when you walk away.
Okay. Really quick, the list. For those that would like to follow up with these, anybody have it?
Back corner.
Back there, okay. Anybody looking for it? It's in the back corner, so move it around. Keep moving it, okay.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Luttrell, and I head up the League of Women Voters up in the Verde Valley. And the question that I have is, we have a lot of programs that are nonpartisan, and we never seem to attract the conservatives. I did a class at our local Ollie, and I had 50 people in the class, and they were all progressives or Democrats. And so I'm wondering, with your organizations and your groups that are you bringing together, are you teaching people how to do this on a one-to-one basis, or are you actually bringing groups together for dialogue? And do you have any success stories where that has worked? Because we're not finding that they come to anything.
Yeah, we do, and when we do civil dialogues, we actually do bring divergent groups together. We've gone through, done in churches where actually there's quite a bit of diversity of opinion, especially around guns. We're from progressive to far more conservative, even within congregations. We've gone to schools, and even at the university where we would thought that we were going to be tipped to more room, we found far more diversity within that. One of the most interesting examples, it was in November, right after the election. My partner, Carolyn McBurney, sitting in the back there, we went out to Boston University to do a research project with the University of Boston. And we went into housing facilities in Boston. And we thought, wow, we're going into communities of color, we're going into a state that has some of the strongest gun laws, and we came in with a really perception that, this is all going to be, it's going to be tough to do civil dialogues because we're not going to get the diversity of agree to strongly disagree within a room. And we were really surprised by what we found and what we were able to draw out from those communities. And the researchers were amazed about what we could do. So don't make the assumption that even just because you're going to be, that there's this uniformity even within a group when you're trying to talk about a subject, and I don't mean just guns, I think about anything. Immigration, water, the environment, education, everything. There is diversity even within groups. So I think, it's about bringing people together and having them talk and in a respectful way, whether it's even families. I don't think you have to try to manufacture a diversity of opinion and say, in our case, we don't need 2 NRA people and 2 million moms and that kind of thing in a group to manufacture that kind of thing. We've never really had a room where everybody agreed so much on one side we couldn't get the other opinions represented. So it's been very surprising for that.
I'm going to address that in a slightly smaller way. We're new, so we're going to be struggling with that as well. But our principle is that participants come to Shoulders Down conversations encouraged to bring someone with them, a friend, a family member who is on the other side from them. So we ask people to bring the problem, basically.
That's great.
And we do. Thank you. The reason we do that is because this conversation you have to have a sort of level of trust. Some basis of trust to start with, and we figured if people brought their friends or family members, they had that to start with. They may or may not be in the same group of conversation. We break into small groups. It's no more than 8 people, 6 people. We have the conversation. What I can tell you practically is that we have feedback from participants who took the tools they used in our 90-minute session home and used them in their family, and it worked for them. They started talking. We had one participant who hadn't spoken about politics to her husband since the election. She came to our session, didn't say a word in the room, went home, used our method with her husband, and talked about the election for the first time. And they're still married, and they're still together. So the idea from our perspective is you start with that one thing you have in common and build from there.
All right, we have a question here in the back.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is, I find when I try to have civil discourse with relatives and friends who are Republicans that they most often want to present their views kind of in the form of a monologue, and then they want the conversation to end after they have presented their views. And a lot of times, most of the time, their views are factually inaccurate. I think Fox News is really good at spreading disinformation. And so, I feel it's a disservice to kind of get up and walk away without trying to correct their facts. And as soon as you get into the facts, they really, really want the conversation to end because they're embracing their view. So my question is, how do you go from the conservative monologue to a real discussion?
That's a good one.
You want to do it? Go ahead.
So, as the recovering Republican in the room, I'll start with that one. And I can honestly say that I have been on the other side of that, where talking to someone who is very liberal and very progressive, who wants to preach to me, and with their thing, and the conversation ends with them. So I think both sides can be guilty of that same tactic. So I wouldn't necessarily label one or the other on that one, in all fairness. And again, try to stay away from trying to correct facts on either side. I think that's where we get into this debate where you're trying to win an argument. If you listen to what we've been saying over the last hour or so, I think a couple things is this. It's that we all try to tell you the same thing, whether you're in a formal group or a family setting or whatever. Is a couple things. Is number one, try to think about framing what you're saying. Look for those common areas where you can start and build the trust from. And if you can think of your conversations with those basic elements, that gets you a lot to start. So I think sometimes, as much as you want to try to correct what you perceive as misinformation and misfacts, because we all love our facts and we all love to try to really hammer. I'm guilty of that, so I can't tell you. I'm a walking, talking encyclopedia of gun violence facts that people will tell you, and I can rattle them off and I can correct them with that. But like that doesn't change people's hearts and minds. I can rattle them off 10 things, but I'm not changing that person's perception because, again, I'm not dealing to their values. One of the things that for example, the NRA does so much well, we lose in a lot of arguments because we lead with our facts and figures. The NRA leads with values. And we've had a lot of discussions among our movement about how we change our messaging because that's how come we're not as successful. And I say that in your own conversations. Lead with your values, lead with your feelings. Facts will come afterwards. Don't get hung up on arguing facts. It really is a black hole.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and I've got like 8 people in the queue for questions. So I'm going to open it up to, I know I've got about 8 people I've kept track of that are next. Questions that don't get answered today, I'm going to say please submit them to any one of the 3 or all 3 of the panel. I think there's going to be some continuing dialogue that we can do. So please be sure to do that, and so others can see them too. All right.
I need some personal advice. My problem is my grandfather.
No judgment. No judging.
I'll be here till Thursday. I'm a foundational person, and one of the things that I want to know about is where and how. When I was a little kid, the Thanksgiving fight was the Bears versus the Packers. And now it ain't about that. When did these things change, and how did they change? Because I'm not aware of how did it happen.
We're in a unique place in history, I think, in America, where I've seen a few studies on this that have said long term, the war on terror mixed with the recession put a lot of these people in a fear place, that they are receptive to this type of misinformation, these types of info wars. And I would say that if we're looking at historical trends, one of the best ways to change that is to take away the fear. Unfortunately, we don't have 3 news stations that control the media right now. So you have to find, this is a big picture issue that we're all working on, how to create peace, how to create stability, all those types look for those types of things. Those are the big picture ways that we reduce the place where people are receptive to these fear messages. Sorry. Big question gets a big answer. Sorry.
Okay.
My question is regarding the lizard brain, and as one who does not typically exist in that mindset, how do you deal with someone that does?
You have to get them out of that thinking. So the best way, this is, a few of you have gotten around to this question, and they had some great answers, but I want to throw this in. Ask them about someone who is from the other side of the aisle that they respect. Start there. Like, whoever it is, like someone that they know in their life, if it was a teacher, or if it was, a grandparent, and why they respected them. Not only will that put them in the mental framework where they're thinking positively about a liberal person, but it also gives you an insight into what they can hear that's a liberal message. Takes them out of the lizard brain, puts them in, all the good stuff up here where we want them.
Okay.
You had mentioned coming to a discourse or a discussion with somebody from your values, but I'm wondering, and I think maybe this is more for you, I think there are certain values that Republicans have that if you come from understanding their values, like patriotism, and I think there's some other things that you could kind of talk about where if you come to an argument and couch it in their values and bring it to their values, it may bring togetherness.
You're 100% right. I don't know. What was the question? What was the...
Good reinforcement.
Oh. Okay, think of it, forget, who was it mentioned, Maslow? Yeah. Think of it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, that for a lot of these people, they're in, and I don't like to think of it as up and down, because this isn't that they're lower, but they think in terms of security, they think in terms of security, the ability to put food on the table, and frankly, the ability to reproduce. And not that you want to get into that too much, but if you can think about it in those frameworks, I mean, this is why gay marriage was such an issue for them, because that's antithetical to their ability to reproduce. When you're thinking about other things like self-actualization and, things being factual and everything else, those other things don't matter as much. But when you're thinking about those things, those are the most important things. Those are and from a military standpoint, when we talk about a mission, we say, where are we going? What's our one thing that we're aiming at? And when you're in the fear place, that's all you can see. You can't see outside of it. So you have to, it keeps coming back to it, and it's what we've all said, you have to pull them out of that mindset. And your family members, in normal conversations, whatever works with them, use those things that work with them in arguments. Follow up with them afterwards, like a little, a note, like, hey, thanks for listening to me. Or hey, let's have a sit-down dialogue. Let's have a nice dialogue. Let's have a dinner where we discuss, and we don't raise our voices if it's your spouse. Things like that where you say, let's just work through finding an answer so that we can figure stuff out together.
I understand that civil dialogue is very important. However, if we look at the power of the bully pulpit, I think the agenda and framing is set by national leaders. How do you turn the tide? How do you frame political agendas considering that our national political leaders, particularly the president, has the power to set this agenda?
I want to say he has that power because we gave it to him and we need to take it back. So the federal government, the larger government, the media, these organizations, we are your consumers. So consume with care, right? You're on social media. Everything you do is being tracked and you're being fed back what you're looking for. And remember that. Remember that it is a habitual effort to gain your money, gain your attention, sell you things, and bring you things that reinforce what you're thinking. They are in the same boat we are in. It's not so much them and us. If you, for me, let me speak for me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to lecture. For me, what I find is if I close my eyes and stop thinking about whether I'm listening to a Republican or a Democrat, and I listen to what they're saying, the words are the same. On the broader scale, they're the same. They don't listen, they want to destroy it. These sort of blanket statements are said the same by both sides. I think that that discussion has merit for people who are in it at this level, but the fix isn't up here, it's down here, one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball.
And this is going to be real short, and this is going to sound really awful, so prepare yourselves. In some ways, Donald Trump is a gift to America. And what I mean by that, Donald Trump has revealed something that if we had a Marco Rubio or if we had a Bush III as president, we would not see. And he's inept. What a gift that is. Think about if he was good, and I bring that up not just to rip on Donald Trump, which we all love if we're in this room, but I also bring it up because this is one of your other inroads. This is a great spot to start a dialogue. Those Republicans, this is a great spot to find. If they can talk negatively about Donald Trump, you know you can talk to this person.
All right, we are within like 2 minutes. Gerry, then I'll let you close out. I did want to say one huge thank you to the three of you for, for sitting up on stage and laying bare so much of your own selves, but then also being able to field questions in front of 200 people. We are scheduled to end this session at 10:45. There's a 15-minute break between now and the next session. We can go over for maybe 3 minutes if people want to stay and listen to a couple more points. But the speaker that's coming in and the session that's coming in afterwards will need to come in and get set up. So I don't want to encourage too much indulgence of that. So Gerry, close us out.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for the privilege of being able to be here today and starting this dialogue with you. We really do feel that this is the beginning of a dialogue. So please, I have business cards here and on our Arizona's for Gun Safety table for you to help sign up. We are happy to continue this conversation one-on-one or with your groups. This is how we change. You know, we set the dialogue. We set the agenda in this country by ourselves. And now, I started work before the social media came on, and I can't tell you the tool that has. It amplifies our voices. It gives us opportunities to have our voices and our agendas heard far more than ever. We are not controlled just by traditional media anymore. Take advantage of that, but more importantly, this work will be done one-on-one, face-to-face, building movements, building coalitions, and doing the work of the people like you in this room. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for being involved. Every single one of you is valuable. Your work is valued, and we are looking forward to working forward with you in the future. Thank you.